Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a diversified media enterprises production. I'm Doug Cunningham. Americans for Tax Fairness say the Republican plan to kill the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, will deliver billions of dollars in tax breaks to corporations and the wealthy while adding taxes to working families. Americans for Tax Fairness is a coalition of groups, including the AFL-CIO and SEIU. House Republicans want to tax workers' health care benefits, a huge $200 billion new tax on middle-class workers. At the same time, according to the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, the total tax breaks for corporations and the rich would be $594 billion over 10 years. When you go into the hospital, if there aren't enough nurses to safely care for all the patients, you have a greater chance of dying. And yet California is the only state in the U.S. with a safe nurse-patient ratio law, thanks to a long effort by the National Nurses United Nurses Union. A 2016 European study of 243 hospitals across Europe found that the more professional nurses on the job, the lower the patient death rates were. Deanne McEwen is an RN and a health and safety specialist with National Nurses United.
This looked at the existing model of care and then just the proportion of RNs to a given group of patients. And cutting the number of RNs, the risk of death can go up very high.
McEwen says nurses in Ohio got a bill introduced there in February to pass a nurse safe staffing ratio law.
Well, we just recently introduced legislation in Ohio, February 14th, Have a Heart for Nurses, and nurses are the heart of patient care, and Senator Michael Scandell there of the introduced the Ohio Patient Protection Act. So the nurses in Ohio and the public good government groups are certainly have read the data, and they want the same protection that we've won here in California.
The New Jersey State Senate is expected to vote Monday on legislation that would let police and firefighter unions manage their own pension systems. Legislation doing that was approved by a state Senate committee on a 10-1 vote. Police and fire unions in New Jersey may try managing their pension systems on their own. Policemen's Benevolent Association President Patrick Culligan says that police can't count on the state of New Jersey to properly care for the pensions anymore. New Jersey has systematically underfunded public employee pensions by not making adequate payments into that system for years.
Sponsored by Ironworkers Impact, now reserving spots for this year's groundbreaking conference, welcoming contractors to grow their business by networking and attending world-class breakouts. More on this event in San Diego, happening March 19th through the 22nd, is found online at impact-net.org under Events.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown it in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead. Make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. The beginning of Trump care. Today's the big day, evidently. The day the CBO may come out with their scoring because, as you know, the Republicans have chose to use budget reconciliation as the vehicle at which they're going to ram through their disaster, the American Health Care Act. Again, adding horrible to the ACA. Now, in order to, and this is the weird kind of technical jivey part, in order to qualify to do this through budget reconciliation, the CBO is going to have to say today or in the coming days, whenever they finish their scoring, they're going to have to say that it's going to save the federal budget at least $2 billion over the next decade, which, understand, to you and me, $2 billion sounds like an awful lot of money. In the federal budget, that's like loose change in the sofa cushions. This isn't a high bar. Understand, not a high bar. And already the Trumpites are trying to undermine the CBO scoring because look, they know this is going to be a disaster. And in fact, they know that it's going to be such a disaster that the Trump people anyway don't want Trump's name on it. Now, this is a guy who slapped his name on everything you could imagine. You know, we got the steaks, we got the wine, we got the golf courses, we got the buildings, we got the Trump University. You name it, he's slapped his name on it, and probably a whole bunch of really shady stuff that we've not even heard of yet. But he doesn't want his name anywhere near this. Again, you go, here's a guy who understands branding. Here's a guy who understands the marketing part of things and doesn't want what could be the signature of his entire presidency, making sure that every American, for the first time in the history of this great nation, has health security. He doesn't want his name anywhere near that. Think about it for a second. He has said it's going to be great. It's going to be wonderful. It's going to be amazing. Everyone's going to be covered. It's going to be lower cost. It's going to be all those things. And yet, doesn't want his name on it. That, I think, should send a huge message. Huge. A bigly huge message. I mean, honestly, stop and think about it. Anything this guy's put his name on. Anything he's come near, he's slapped his name on. Not this. So, again, not surprised that he doesn't want his name on it because it's a disaster. And we know it's a disaster. In fact, the New York Times, I think, hit it best in one of their op-eds, where it basically, it came very, very, very concise. The Republican plan would spend less on providing health insurance to the poor, but it also eliminates all the Obamacare taxes, reducing the revenue coming to the federal government. And this is basically what I've been saying all along. We're gonna take insurance from the poor working people. Medicaid is still gonna mostly be there, but we're giving all of the revenue away. And this is the thing. And I go back to Nancy Pelosi saying, the more you learn about the ACA, the more you're gonna like it. At the time, I said it was a dumb thing. Still think it was kind of a dumb thing to say. But had they made the arguments that we're getting today about it, 7 years ago, maybe it wouldn't be this kind of a mess. Completely paid for by taxes on the well-to-do and on these insurance companies who are making just obscene, outrageous profits. It was paid for. So now what they've done, if they do nothing else, they've already created the death spiral that will destroy the Affordable Care Act, and they know that because they've defunded it. That's always been the problem with anything that the public sector does, because you're always going to get a handful of crazy people, and right now they're the Republicans, who are going to use the power of the purse to starve anything they want. And healthcare is what they're going to starve. Understand, that's what's going to happen. Now, the CBO is going to have to come out with their numbers, the Congressional Budget Office. They're going to have to say that it's going to save $2 billion over 10 years, not a high bar. But there's some other things. What are the long-term costs? What's it going to cost us? How many people are going to lose their health insurance? And I've seen estimates, anywhere from 5 to 20 million people are going to lose their health insurance. How much are premiums going to change? For people who buy their insurance off the private market, for people who get their employer-based health care, how much are we looking at premium changes? Whoppingly, most experts are saying it's going up. The cost of insurance is not going down. And that's one of those things where you go, well, wait a second, whoa. I thought Trump said everyone's going to get covered and it's going to be a lot cheaper and it's going to be great. What happened? Well, sorry. Oops. Again, why he doesn't want his name anywhere near it. But they're saying premiums could go up as high as 30% immediately. And you go, whoa. Hold on. But Obamacare is, that's been, 40, 50%. We've heard all these numbers. Truth of the matter is Obamacare has pretty much flattened out the rate of increases, because for those of us who were paying attention before the healthcare debate, healthcare premiums kept going up, and up. They're skyrocketing, which is why the Affordable Care Act was so necessary, and why, honestly, they put in those parameters of you can only spend this amount of money on giving money to CEOs. The other question that I have is how many people are going to lose their Medicaid? Since we're now undoing the Medicaid expansion, because this is part of this, how many people are going to lose it there? You're talking probably somewhere upwards of 18 million people across the U.S. And you go, well, what about employer-based? Well, I don't care about those poor Medicaid people. What about people who have jobs? They're also saying that people who get their health care from their companies, as many as 5 million of those folks could lose their health insurance. Because understand, what the ACA did is it put in some things. It said if you have full-time employees, you should offer them health insurance or pay a penalty. So they said, oh, okay, we'll offer them health insurance. And that actually got more people insured. So you go back and you look at this and you go, there were a lot of really good things that were going to hopefully inevitably get us to the point of single payer. It's always been my hope for this. And I think that's what Republicans really understand, that the healthcare debate, if they don't get ahead of it, if they don't get in and muck this up and make it look really bad, because anything the government does is bad. If they don't get to muck this up, then the next step is, hey, how do we make it better? And as I said when the ACA passed, look at Medicare. Look at how the Medicare program in the 60s, how it flourished. Because people go, oh, hey, we got this. Let's make it better. I guess that was a different generation. Let's make it better. Let's make sure it's there for us when we get to be old. Let's make sure we have some security. That was that generation. This generation seems to be, no, hammer, smash, bad. Yeah. So what are the Republicans doing? What are the Trumpites doing now ahead of the CBO scoring, you ask? Well, they sent out their minions. You had Mick Mulvaney, who is the budget director, Office of Budget and Management, and you had Gary Cohn, the top White House economic advisor. They hit the shows on Sunday, basically doing the CBO, they're focused on the wrong thing, or it's outside of their ability to do, and everything they can do to undermine. And this is what they do, but you got to undermine the Congressional Budget Office. And you've got to point to past failures. For instance, the Congressional Budget Office did say that the Affordable Care Act would get more people insurance. They believed, I think the number was like 20 million that they thought would get insurance under the Affordable Care Act. It's been about 11. So you go, well, it's a huge failure. No. It got 11 million people insurance. Did they underscore? Did they miss the bar by a little? Yeah, they did. But it's not like 11 million people lost their health insurance. And they did say over a decade. So we're only we still got a little ways to go yet. So they could be right. But here's the thing, and this is what they have to do. This is what Republicans have to do here. Because all experts are saying this CBO report is not going to be very good for Republicans, not going to be very good for the selling of this horrible mess. So they've got to undermine it. They've got to make them look feckless and unable to do anything. Again, in the Trump supporter world, that's already what they believe. Nothing good can come out of the public sector. It's the rest of us who have to pay attention to this and go, wait a second. I'm not buying it. Because, look, what Mulvaney said, and what they both said, I think, is instead of analyzing the numbers, you know, like how much it's going to cost, how much money we're giving to rich people, how many people are going to lose their health insurance, how many people are going to eventually die because they don't have coverage, we should look at, you know, can people actually go to the doctor? And you go, yeah, most people could actually go to see a doctor in an emergency room if there's an emergency room in your neighborhood. Because once we kill the ACA, kiss a lot of those emergency rooms goodbye. But this idea that you can actually go to the doctor, here's the other part of this. Can you pay for it? Look, in this country, you do have the ability to go to a doctor if you're dying. If you're laying in the street, we're going to come and get an ambulance. They're going to pick you up. They're going to take you to a hospital. The hospital is going to make sure that you don't die at that moment. And once they say, okay, good luck, follow up with your family doctor, they wheel you to the curb and leave you there. We saw this happen in California. They were literally wheeling people out to the curb, putting them in cabs and dropping them on Skid Row. Is that the future that we want? And to be honest, looking at the Republicans, I can't say that. No, I can't say that's not what they want. Scary, scary stuff. Lots to get to today. The healthcare stuff we're going to continue with. Also going to find out, get our weekly dose of sanity. Up next, we're going to talk with Propane Jane. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
And I don't believe that God wants me to give my money to someone like you. But I do believe in what a crazy man can do.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1946. That was the day that United Auto Worker members won an 18.5-cent hourly raise after a 4-month strike against General Motors. After World War II, workers grew increasingly frustrated. The war years were a time of labor peace, as most unions agreed not to go out on strike in order to support the war production efforts. But during the war, as companies raked in profits, many workers felt that they were not receiving a fair share. Worse, wartime shortages saw the price of consumer goods skyrocket. A dollar simply could not stretch as far as it once had. After the war ended, the workers wanted to make up for the ground they felt they had lost during the conflict. A wave of strikes washed over the United States. Walter Reuther led the auto workers out on strike on November 21st, 1945. Their demand was a 30% raise. Reuther publicly argued that General Motors could afford to pay the raise without raising the price of their cars. He urged the company to open its books so the public could see their finances. The UAW laid out its reasoning in a report entitled Purchasing Power for Prosperity. The strike wore on for more than 100 days, but the union had done a good job making its case to the public. Finally, General Motors agreed to a raise, as well as improved benefits, such as a better recognition of seniority and promotions and protections for the union members. The contract was seen as a huge step forward for organized labor to take a seat at the table with capital. The strike and its settlement solidified Reuther as the leader of the UAW and a powerful voice for workers. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happy!
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
Somebody's watching you, you like it.
be afraid. Be very, very afraid. Your microwave is watching you. This is one of those moments where you go, it's almost mockable, but it's scary because you've got Kellyanne Conway, who is a senior White House advisor. She's the person who's got the president's ear. So this has got to be something that has muttered out of the president's mouth. Evidently, according to Kellyanne Conway, she was interviewed yesterday by New Jersey's The Record newspaper, and she said that the government has many ways. They've got many ways to surveil. She said, quote, there are many ways to surveil each other. You can surveil someone through their phones, certainly through their television sets, any number of ways, including your microwave. Your microwave is watching you. And look, there are a number of ways for the NSA and for the federal government to spy on us. Absolutely. But continually pushing your microwave's watching you and continually pushing this stuff, to me, only is to make us, well, really distrustful of our government. And that's scary, scary stuff. Here to talk a little bit about this, give us our weekly dose of sanity. I've asked our good friend Propane Jane to come talk with us. Jane, thanks for taking time for us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me back.
So your microwave is watching you.
I'm so glad you started there because I was just reading an article about actually it was a moment on Twitter and just sort of reading all of the tweets about her saying that we can be surveilled through our microwaves and our televisions. And so it's great that you started there because just, oh my gosh, right? I mean, I agree that she's in Trump's ear. And also he's in her ear, and it's sort of scary to think that both of them are sort of believing the same delusions, and neither one of them, has the capacity to say maybe this isn't something we should go out and actually say to the American people. But unfortunately, this is what they're doing, and I do think that the goal is to be crazy making, in particular with his supporters, to spread this paranoia and this idea that there's a deep state, quote unquote, and that you can't trust your neighbors, you can't trust the media, you can't trust the government, you can't trust anyone, and so let's just allow the worst of fascism to take hold because we have to do this to protect ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, it's scary.
I do think that they're creating that.
No, and they're creating it. Look, and Hollywood does it too. And I got to wonder how much of this paranoia comes from Hollywood. Because, look, we do live in an era where anyone can hack into your stuff. In fact, I think there was a movie not too long ago where basically someone hacked into someone's smart house and basically controlled everything they saw and did. It was kind of scary. But, that's Hollywood. I get that. Coming out of the White House, a senior advisor saying your microwave can watch you, that's scary stuff.
Yeah. And I think that the thing that makes it the most scary is that again, it is a bait and switch because what they're projecting, the paranoia that Trump feels internally, that he should actually feel. I mean, he should be paranoid that, that his phones are being tapped and that the intelligence community knows that he's been in contact with Russia in ways that are treasonous and that actually are not consistent with what we would want our president to do, or our president-elect, or someone who's, a candidate running for president. And so he rightfully so is paranoid, right? But in his paranoia, he is deflecting the responsibility away from himself and the things that he's done onto people to say that there's a conspiracy, there's a plot against him, that he doesn't deserve this. He's just a victim of circumstances and of this vast liberal conspiracy. And so that's meant to obfuscate. It's meant to get people riled up in this idea that they can't trust our institutions. instead of looking at him and going, we can't actually trust him.
Right.
He's the one that's doing all of these things.
Well, to be honest, when I heard this, that the microwaves are watching us, and you think about, look, I know you can listen through the smartphones, and there are the TV things. There's some questions there, but to have the president say it and have it on his mind starts making me think of when he does finally have his snap. Does he start using this against us? I mean, is he now finding out this stuff is existing, and is now going, hey, I can use this?
And I think that there are reports coming out that he is using it even within his own administration. That he's actually when these leaks started to happen, that internally they started to actually surveil their own people.
Yep.
So it's something that yes, I think will be sort of propagated in terms of policy, and certainly we already have the Patriot Act that arose from 9/11 and the paranoia and the justified fear of terrorism and attacks being used as a way to kind of capitalize on people's fear and actually push through policies that become more of an attack on our civil liberties. But aside from that, I do think that that what he's going to do within his administration to clamp down on leaks or to clamp down on whistleblowers will sort of be the first exhibition of that authoritarian power.
Yes.
Because they need to present as united a front as they can, and they've already gotten off to such a bad start on that front.
Yeah, if they start boiling their own people in oil, what are they going to do to protesters and people who are, look, I mean, understand what they do to their own. That's what they will want to eventually do to the rest of us. Because look, as you see more protests, as you see more people getting involved and into the streets, we're seeing states across the country going, hey, how do we hold this stuff in check, and how do we make the penalties just so draconian that people walk away?
Right. And I think, when we talk about the paranoia that is happening societally, it actually can work in two ways. I mean, for the people who are sort of reality based, it can galvanize us as well. And we have a choice to say, okay, yes, as they're clamping down harder, we're going to fight back even harder. But then obviously there's going to be some attrition, right? Because not everyone can, take time off of their job and be out in the streets or risk being arrested, or obviously if it becomes an issue where they're actually brutalizing people in the streets, not everybody's going to want to actually put their body and their life on the line for this. But I also think that the fact that there is a persistent resistance movement, and there is all of this suspicion and distrust of his administration, I do think that because that is happening, inside of his mind, the volume is turned up so high on his own paranoia, because he sees that people are pushing back, and he sees that, yes, even though he's trying to put forth this image that he's a competent leader, that still, his approval rating isn't what he wants it to be. And he can sort of make up whatever fantasies that he's had so many supporters and rallies and this, that, and the other, but still the facts on the paper are that he's not a popular president, and that, even the judiciary is fighting him tooth and nail. So, sort of leading into my most recent piece that came out yesterday on Daily Kos, I call it the telltale tweet. And I compare what's going on inside of Trump's mind to Edgar Allan Poe's, very famous short story. And the narrator there is convinced that, this old man is like stalking him with this eye, and, the quote unquote microwaves, the eye in your television, and that this individual is scheming against him, and it drives him mad to where he kills this guy, and dismembers his body, puts it under the floorboards, but then he's creating a stir and drawing attention to the fact that he's committed this murder, and he's trying to convince everyone that that he's sane. And that, there really was this vulture eye, there really was this old man that was out to get him, and that he had to do what he did. And so he brings the investigators into his home, right on top of where the body sits. But then the noise, the beating of that telltale heart, drives him so mad that he actually just confesses and tells them to rip up the floorboards to reveal the body. And so Trump, in a lot of ways, with his tweets, with all of these, suspicious, kind of just delusions that they're passing around, they're bringing more attention to the fact that they've actually done something, and it's summoning the authorities to look for a body, and that's kind of what's happening right now.
Interesting. I mean, it's an interesting thought. I mean, I don't ever see Trump getting to the point where he would confess on himself knowingly, but you're probably right. I mean, you look at the tweets, you look at maybe there's a justification.
Yeah, he feels that he's being watched because he is being watched. I mean, we know that he was being surveilled by 17 intelligence agencies. Hillary Clinton said it over and over again during the debate. And so I do think that people around him are probably trying to inform him that yes, we are being surveilled. This is how Flynn went down. This is how Jeff Sessions is now in the hot seat, and trying to explain to him that, no, this is really a serious crisis situation, but rather than deal with it in that place, he's now turning it into, this deep state, vast conspiracy that, again, is obviously being buttressed by the right-wing media, Breitbart, Bannon, Fox News, and all of these outlets that are just, swimming in this sea of delusion, but it's all guilty delusion.
Right. But here's the thing. I mean, this plays into, all of the tinfoil hat, all of the radical right-wing thoughts. So this is selling newspapers. This is selling ad space on your crazy websites and your far out, midnight talk show hosts.
Yeah. And I mean, the National Enquirer. There are certainly, again, like you talked about last time, we think about this as a friend, but the fact that it remains and is so insidious, and there is this undercurrent of people who just sort of believe things that are not rooted in evidence, and either aren't interested or even capable of seeking out factual information and using this, critical thinking skills. And so it's not so much that this is new. I mean, certainly people have, there's people who still think that the moon landing was fake. And various aspects of that. But I do think that when a cultural identity, when a way of life and a belief system and a political ideology is predicated on this belief system of, we are victims, we are being oppressed by people of color, we are being oppressed by immigrants, we are being oppressed by various government agencies. That ideology, it needs a constant good versus evil battle to be playing out in order for it to continue and to thrive in our politics, So,
no, you need the black and white thought process. And look,
exactly.
And I don't know if that's I've read articles and talked to people who think that's the difference between conservatives and liberals. Liberals live in kind of a gray area where things are, you take facts into consideration, whereas conservatives are very black and white. It's either absolutely right or absolutely wrong, and there's no in between.
Well, I think again, a lot of that is again, we think about it philosophically, but it actually is connected to geography. And so, we can call it black and white thinking, or we can call it gray. But if you live in a more diverse urban community, you do see more gray, right? You see different, people. You see people from all different walks of life. You see different circumstances. You're more likely to see non-traditional households. You're more likely to see people who work in different industries. And so there is a lot of gray just in that reality. But when you live in a rural community, where you're sort of, hours away from the nearest metropolitan area, and everybody is very homogenous, and everybody sort of looks the same, believes the same, votes the same. It may or may not be that they're, willfully choosing to believe that there's nothing outside of that. But at least for what's in front of them, that's what is their reality, is that there is a black and white, and there is a very sharp line in terms of what they see and how those messages are transmitted to them through their televisions and radios.
That's a good point. And as you were talking about it, I'm thinking about the representative from Iowa, Steve King, who came out
terrible
and has taken some
terrible.
An interesting position, if to say the least, that we're not going to. What did exactly they say? You're not going to replace.
I don't know, something about other people's babies.
Yeah, it was some bizarre statement like that. But again, he's playing to the base. I mean, Iowa is, as you've said, one of the most homogenous states in the country, very much a white state, and that kind of rhetoric, I believe, would play in Iowa.
Oh, absolutely, and it certainly did. I mean, again, when we look at the swing states, or I don't even know if you can call a lot of these places swing states anymore in terms of just how their demographics have changed. But yes, and Iowa, that's also no coincidence. I mean, when you think about the primaries and you think about the way our political process is organized in America, everything starts in Iowa and New Hampshire, right? I mean, everything starts in places that are 90+% white, and that aren't very heterogeneous in terms of their demographics and life circumstance. And so months and months and months are spent on the views of the people that live there. What are they looking for in a representative? What are they looking for in terms of policy? And what they're looking for is somebody like Steve King, who, and this is not the first time that he's made overtly racist comments. He was talking about people, Mexicans coming over the border, and something about their calves are the size of cantaloupe. That was a couple of years ago. And so, but this is something that they, presumably know about him and are cheering him on and continue to send him back to D.C. To just be a plague on our discourse and our government.
And that's it, a plague on our discourse.
And there are people in districts all across America. Hey, I'm here in Texas, right? I mean, and this is what sells, and this is what people vote for, even if they themselves aren't, going around wearing a white hood or, proudly identifying as a person who's a racist or a bigot. But behind the scenes, they are most certainly voting for people who say things like this, not holding them accountable for saying those things, and also supporting policies that are the institutionalization of those bigotries.
Yeah. So last question I have for you then on this, because you look at this kind of messaging, and I look at the statement. Someone told me about Steve Bannon. Well, Steve Bannon's not really a racist. It's just he does it because that's what people want. He's a businessman providing a service, and I've actually believed that's much worse. So do you think what's coming out of the White House do they really believe this stuff, or is it that this is how we use the tinfoil folks and grow that segment of people to be defenders? And use them kind of as the useful idiots, or do they really believe it?
Yeah, I guess my answer would be, does it matter? I mean, if the outcome ultimately is the propagation of Jim Crow and apartheid, then does it matter if they genuinely feel it in their hearts or not? I mean, if they're a businessman and they're seeing this as a way to make money, the outcome is still racism, and it's still oppression, and it's still misogyny, and it's still xenophobia, and it's still homophobia. I mean, it's still all of these things that are morally apprehensive. And at the same time, these are people who are claiming to be Christian and claiming to be evangelicals, and it's totally hypocritical to even their own stated values. So I think that's sort of a mental gymnastics or a cognitive dissonance that people are doing there in trying to go, oh, it's just business, to maybe sort of absolve that person of the ugliest base impulses of racism. But if you peddle in racism, you're okay with it, and if you're benefiting from it, that's blood money. And so it's bad either way. And I think that, nobody should get a free pass, whether it's, the person that goes and votes for this or, Bannon or Trump, who are at the top trickling it down.
Yeah, see, because I actually think it's worse if, you can have some disagreements with people who actually believe this to their core. I kind of, on some level, I can almost respect that a little bit, that you're willing to take the consequences for what you claim to believe. But if you
and just be honest,
yeah, I mean, but if you don't believe it and you're simply using it for one gain or another, I actually think that's much worse.
Yeah, and I think it's much worse, and I don't even understand it. I don't even understand if that's not something that in your soul you firmly believe, how you can do that. And if that's the case, then yes, money is the root of all evil, and it's a sickness. But again, I think for the people in marginalized communities, it doesn't matter one hill of beans if the person believes it or not. The outcome is still that they're oppressed.
No, good point.
And that the policy is still in place. And that nothing is changing because people are sort of finding ways to wiggle out of it, and so ultimately I think that the more that we can tie the actual outcomes, what actually happens, whatever your stated intentions are, here are the outcomes of voter suppression. Here are the outcomes of shutting down Planned Parenthood. Here are the you have all of these outbreaks that are happening. In Indiana and Louisiana, and, when these governors get rid of family planning and contraception services, and there's all these STD breakouts, well, ultimately, what was your stated goal?
I think more people with STDs and thinning the herd. I truly believe that that's the point. It's that moral superiority, but it is what it is. Anyway, I appreciate the time. I can't wait for next week. But I appreciate your thoughts.
All right. Keep up the fight and have a great week.
You too. Propane Jane, great stuff. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Me and my people are through. Me and my people are ready. Me and my people are just about due. I'm a massive airstrike on a beautiful night. Yeah, it's my song I'm singing. Somebody better start counting. We're coming out swinging.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
It's time to state the obvious. The President of the United States is deranged. I don't mean he's merely idiosyncratic, nor do I say this as a political jab. I mean that Donald J. Trump literally is mentally ill. Okay, I'm no doctor, but you don't need a doctorate in mental disorders to see that his behavior in public and on Twitter is beyond abnormal. It's psychotic. As we've seen, he routinely plunges into prolonged fits of petty paranoia. He succumbs to delusions of imperialist grandeur. He spouts ridiculous right-wing rumors as facts and denies that actual facts are true. And he is pathologically addicted to lying, bizarrely repeating his most blatant fabrications even after they've been totally debunked. A sane, temperamentally balanced president, possessing all the power and majesty that America's supreme office conveys, doesn't get into demeaning public snits with the likes of Arnold Schwarzenegger, doesn't feel a constant need to puff himself up with ridiculously false claims, such as his frantic insistence that the crowd at his inaugural celebration was the largest ever, doesn't rage rabidly at media outlets that displease him, blasting them as enemies of the people, and does not unleash a furious all-out attack on Barack Obama just because some radio talk show screwball made a proof-free claim that the former president had wiretapped Trump's campaign. This is Jim Hightower saying, these are not mere eccentricities, not just Trump being Trump. It's obvious that the guy is not well and is unable to handle the stress of being president. Indeed, his flaky behavior suggests he's on the brink of a personal breakdown, and his ever more frequent retreats to his posh Florida golf resort tells us he doesn't even want to do the job. His loved ones and his party should intervene for his sake and for America's, but they won't. So, will we?
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
The most important issues of the day. This is The Rick Smith Show.
John McCain was on CNN's State of the Union on Sunday. He said, quote, there are a lot of aspects of this whole relationship with Russia and Vladimir Putin that require further scrutiny. And so far, I don't think the American people have gotten all the answers. He goes on to say, I think there are a lot more shoes to drop from this centipede. And at the end of it, yes, lots of shoes, which is why I think the Trumpites are trying to change the message. It's all about the police state. The microwaves are watching you. Wow. Anyway, let's find out what's going on around the world. In Washington, D.C., Victoria Jones, Talk Media News. Victoria, thanks for taking time for us.
Hello.
So have you covered your microwave today? Did you cover it up so it can't watch you?
Hang on. Oh, that was me trying to clear my microwave. If you heard the beep, I was doing a little bit of sound for you there.
Yeah, I heard it.
You did hear it?
I got it.
Oh, good. Doing a little bit of actuality.
Bringing some props. I like it.
Yeah. Always try to keep it real. Well, I'm concerned. It's an old microwave, an American brand, but that doesn't mean that just because it's an American brand, it couldn't be a false flag.
All right. There's an American brand of microwave still? It must be really old.
It's a GE.
Yeah, but it's not made in the U.S.
Oh, I shouldn't think it's made in the U.S. for a minute. No, well, then it probably is spying on me then, isn't it?
Could be. Who knows?
Along with my smart TV, which is spying on me from one end of my studio, and then I've got this spying on me. So I've actually got nowhere to hide unless I rush into the bathroom or something.
Yeah, you're being watched everywhere you go. But here's the thing. I think there are a lot of people who believe that, Victoria. I mean, and look, I've always said that they could turn my phone on and listen and find where I'm at. There's a lot of people who believe that the government's watching us and that the government is evil.
Well, I mean, there are aspects of this that I buy into. For example, I don't like the idea that when I go through a traffic light, when that light flashes, and and they know where it's been. I don't like that.
Yeah. I don't like it either. I don't like that when you go through, they mail you a ticket. Absolutely. I'm with you.
Yeah, and they don't destroy those films. You know, they keep them. I'm talking about them now.
Yeah. No,
I'm into one of them.
I'm hearing you. So yeah, big stuff. Let's move on. Big winter storm hitting. I guess D.C. is going to be shut down. Is that a good thing?
Well, potentially. It depends whether the Congressional Budget Office call for Ryan Care, Trump Care, Rhino Care, Rubbish Care, Obamacare, 0.20, 3.5, 7.97.6 FM comes out first, which I think it will if it comes out today. The storm isn't expected to hit until tonight, and then it'll be all through tomorrow. So I suspect if the government does shut down, it'll shut down tomorrow or Wednesday. I do think it could have an impact on the federal government. Yes, I do think it will likely have an effect on the government. Because we could get in the district 8 inches or so.
Yeah, I know. And when you guys get a flurry, it shuts things down.
Well, it's a southern town. We don't know how to drive. You know, we're southern.
I don't know that I would put D.C. as a southern town.
Officially, we're a southern town. We're in the south. Officially, D.C. Maryland, where I am, is not in the south. But D.C. officially is in the south.
I guess if you use the Mason-Dixon line as your border, then yeah, okay, you're in the south.
And they've taken that as their license to be incapable of dealing with snow, driving, and plows and salt.
Got it. So the CBO score, what are we expecting?
Well, it's very interesting because, Keith Hall, who is the chief of the CBO and who's sort of a well-set guy with a beard and just looks like a very solid, wonky, mathematical guy, was handpicked by the Republicans 2 years ago. And so he's in charge of this, and he is not expected to come out with something terribly favorable necessarily to the Republicans. And he signaled that his office isn't going to soft pedal coverage assessments. If a health plan does not have comprehensive benefits, it will not count as coverage, for example.
Right.
And so because Republicans are worried about a bad score, they're turning the budget agency, which is independent, into a bit of a punching bag. And they're basically saying, well, they don't know what they're doing. They really shouldn't be doing this kind of thing. This is the only thing the CBO does.
Right.
Is score bills.
So if we can't trust them, then you can trust nobody, and that's really the hope, that we trust nobody except Donald.
Just Donald. You could trust Paul Ryan under some conditions. I mean, there are people you can trust. You could trust Steve Bannon.
I don't think I would ever trust Steve Bannon.
No?
No, I don't think I would. There are a list of people that you'd never trust. I think he's on that list of people you never trust.
Okay. All right then. Well, but the score is expected to come back showing that fewer people will be covered and that it will cost more. And so Paul Ryan was asked yesterday, okay, so if fewer people would, how many would be covered? He said, I can't answer that question. It's up to people.
It's up to people. You mean those poor people who don't want health care?
He said people are going to do what they want to do with their lives because we believe in individual freedom in this country.
Yes. I'm loving it. Yeah, because I love the idea that I have the freedom to not get health care when I'm sick. I love the freedom of going bankrupt if I do. That's the American dream, the freedom to go broke.
But you don't have freedom to go over the speed limit.
No, or they'll send you. I'm sensing that you got one of those tickets in the mail.
I have. So there's freedoms that Paul Ryan supports and freedoms that he does not support.
Right. Well, hey, that's just how it is in their world. It's hard juggling all those balls.
Freedom isn't free.
That's right. Freedom's not free. What other slogan can we throw in there?
I don't know. I'm sure we could come up with a few.
Because there's a lot of bumper sticker sloganeering going on right now.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There is. So anyway, but all is not well in Ryan Care world, because the conservatives in the House and in the Senate are looking like they might be willing to scupper or scuttle this bill.
And they should, because it's garbage.
They're serious. Yeah, they're serious about it.
Which is why Trump doesn't want his name on it. This is the guy who slapped his name on meat.
He did.
And it's not even, from what I hear, any good. But he doesn't want his name anywhere near the word care.
No, he doesn't right now. That could change if it becomes, law. Maybe he will. But right now, they don't. They want it called by its full name, the American Health Care Act.
Yeah, because they don't want to have to wear this thing around their neck for the next 4 years when it fails, or heaven forbid it actually passes and makes things worse. But I argue they don't need to pass anything. They've already done enough to destroy the Affordable Care Act. They've already done enough to take Obamacare and cause the death spiral that they've been begging for the last 7 years. They've already done enough by cutting the funding for it.
Well, and I think the question for Democrats is, are they going to be able to hang this round their neck effectively in 2018? In other words, can the Democrats, this may be a rhetorical question, can the Democrats be effective?
Yeah, that's going to happen.
Maybe they can. Maybe they can.
Yeah, maybe. And maybe it's not going to snow tomorrow. Maybe.
Oh, you really think it's that unlikely?
Yeah, I think it's that unlikely. I have very little faith in the party, but we'll see. And finally, over the weekend, the big news, the firing. What are we hearing?
46 U.S. attorneys were fired on Friday, so Friday afternoon. And what was odd about, including Barara, the very prominent Manhattan prosecutor, fiercely independent, who also oversees Manhattan. But what was odd about, a number of things were odd about this. One thing that was odd about this was that on Wednesday, there was a conference called for the U.S. attorneys with the federal prosecutors, who are political appointments. So many of them they drafted their resignation letters, some of them were expecting to be let go because they serve at the pleasure of the president.
Right.
But they had a conference call on Wednesday with Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, that was a pep talk about keep going with the cases you've got, and there was no indication that anything was amiss. And then suddenly on Friday, it's like, clean out your desk by the end of the day and go. I mean, one guy has been there, I think he's Wisconsin, somewhere up there. He's been there since 1980.
Wow.
Yeah, some of them have been there since the 90s. These are not like people who've just landed in these jobs. One guy was overseas. He had to send a blast email to all his colleagues. This has left some very upset and angry people in these jobs to fill in, because people are very hurt over the way and confused over the way this happened. And so the questions, I think, that are facing Department of Justice reporters and others are what changed between Wednesday and Friday, other than Sean Hannity saying on the television that these U.S. attorneys needed to be fired.
Yeah, well, other than that, obviously that there's that. But here's the thing. From what I understand, especially with Bahara, Trump had actually asked him to stay on back in November, and from the reporting that I've seen, kind of gave him a vote of confidence. And as you said, Wednesday you have the big pep talk, and Friday you're all fired. It's that kind of neurotic behavior that I think is really the hallmark of this administration.
And I think that's what some people are thinking: was this malevolent or was it incompetent? They're not sure. And then there was the call to Ferrara from Trump via an aide that went to his voicemail, and Ferrara didn't call back because he said there are protocols between my office and the White House where you're not supposed to speak. So he didn't. He consulted with the Attorney General's office and agreed that he should not call back. Then the White House for 3 days would not tell the media, the press, what the call was about. For 3 days, refused to say. Then Sunday afternoon, they said, well, it was just to wish him well. Well, why did it take 3 days to say that?
It's to wish him well. You're fired. I mean, I don't think I've ever been fired from a job where, the boss calls me and says, oh, by the way, sorry we had to fire you, but good luck.
And that's what they say the call was about.
Wow.
But it took them 3 days to say that.
Crazy stuff, but still fun. Victoria, appreciate the time.
Thank you so much.
Great talking to you, Victoria Jones. Yeah, crazy. I've never had that. I've never had someone who's fired me go, oh, hey, by the way, sorry. I hope you do well. Good luck. Use my name. Never had that. Never had it. Quick break. Right back.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a diversified media enterprises production. I'm Doug Cunningham. Americans for Tax Fairness say the Republican plan to kill the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, will deliver billions of dollars in tax breaks to corporations and the wealthy while adding taxes to working families. Americans for Tax Fairness is a coalition of groups, including the AFL-CIO and SEIU. House Republicans want to tax workers' health care benefits, a huge $200 billion new tax on middle-class workers. At the same time, according to the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, the total tax breaks for corporations and the rich would be $594 billion over 10 years. When you go into the hospital, if there aren't enough nurses to safely care for all the patients, you have a greater chance of dying. And yet California is the only state in the U.S. with a safe nurse-patient ratio law, thanks to a long effort by the National Nurses United Nurses Union. A 2016 European study of 243 hospitals across Europe found that the more professional nurses on the job, the lower the patient death rates were. Deanne McEwen is an RN and a health and safety specialist with National Nurses United.
This looked at the existing model of care and then just the proportion of RNs to a given group of patients. And cutting the number of RNs, the risk of death can go up very high.
McEwen says nurses in Ohio got a bill introduced there in February to pass a nurse safe staffing ratio law.
Well, we just recently introduced legislation in Ohio, February 14th, Have a Heart for Nurses, and nurses are the heart of patient care, and Senator Michael Skendell there of the introduced the Ohio Patient Protection Act. So the nurses in Ohio and the public good government groups are certainly have read the data, and they want the same protection that we've won here in California.
The New Jersey State Senate is expected to vote Monday on legislation that would let police and firefighter unions manage their own pension systems. Legislation doing that was approved by a state Senate committee on a 10-1 vote. Police and fire unions in New Jersey may try managing their pension systems on their own. Policemen's Benevolent Association President Patrick Culligan says that police can't count on the state of New Jersey to properly care for the pensions anymore. New Jersey has systematically underfunded public employee pensions by not making adequate payments into that system for years.
Sponsored by Iron Workers Impact, now reserving spots for this year's groundbreaking conference, welcoming contractors to grow their business by networking and attending world-class breakouts. More on this event in San Diego, happening March 19th through the 22nd, is found online at impact-net.org under Events.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Rebuilding America. The Rick Smith Show.
The walls come tumbling down. The walls come crumbling, crumbling. The walls come tumbling, tumbling down.
I remember back during the 2016 presidential election, you had Hillary Clinton coming around, and really Bernie Sanders led this, saying that we needed $1 trillion in infrastructure spending, of which Hillary came along and said, yes, we're going to do that. We're going to have our $1 trillion plan. And then, of course, Donald Trump jumped on and said, no, we're going to do it bigger. It's going to be huge, and it's going to be fabulous. And he has proposed the idea of $1 trillion in infrastructure spending, although again, playing the politics from what I'm hearing, they're not going to actually consider that until, well, next year, when I argue the problem will just continually get worse. But $1 trillion sounds like a lot of money, right? Well, according to the American Society of Civil Engineers, in order for us just to get from the D+ rating where they put us right now with infrastructure up to a B, it would cost $4.6 trillion. Well beyond the $1 trillion. But hey, $1 trillion is a good start. And here to talk about this and what we need and what we should be doing and all of that, I've asked Larry Willis. He's the Secretary-Treasurer of the Transportation Trades Department of the AFL-CIO. Larry, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thank you. Happy to join you this morning.
So I look at the this latest report, $4.6 trillion over the next decade, I guess.
Yeah, it's gonna take us a while, and it's gonna cost a lot of money. But you're absolutely right. That's the number that the Society of Engineers has a peg to really fix this problem. It's a huge bill that we need to pay.
Now, as I remember, their last report, again, much similar to this one, says we really haven't done much in the years since. Was I think it was like $3 trillion. And I would argue if we do nothing in the next 5 years, it's going to double on this. The cost of inaction is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Well, that is one of the major takeaways, I think, from this report. I mean, obviously they rank our overall infrastructure as a D. In some areas of transportation that we work a lot on, Ds or D minuses. The railroads get the best grade at C. That's mostly privately funded. But so in addition to the bad grade that we're seeing across the board, that it does get more expensive every year, and with Congress, I guess every Congress and every decade that you wait. And right now is a perfect time to address the problem because interest rates are still low; they're creeping up a little bit, but it's still a great time to try to borrow money for the federal government and state governments to make these long-term investments. And we know that from an economic perspective and from a job perspective, while we've made tremendous strides since the Great Recession, there's still a level of underemployment out there that we really need to address. So both from an immediate jobs perspective and a longer term strengthen our economy perspective, this is really the right way to go.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I mean, I think all of us, whether you drive on roads or over bridges or you see the news where we've got levees that are crumbling apart, there's a lot of stuff that has to be done. And, it should have been done 10 years ago, but now's the time.
Right. I mean, you can keep delaying it.
I don't know that we can keep delaying it. I don't know how much longer we can delay. And this is the scary part of this because I drive a truck on the weekends, and they have this little camera in there that it records every time the truck is in an accident. So every time the truck thinks it's in an accident, the cameras go on and everything's recording. All day long, that camera is going on and off from hitting how huge the potholes and how bad the roads are.
Right. Yeah, and what I was going to say is what Ed Whitkin, my president, I think has said on your show. Bridges don't almost fall down; they fall down. And you gave the example of potholes. We have bridges that are functionally falling apart. We've got transit systems that are decades behind in the investment that they need. Amtrak is in many cases operating with 100-year-plus old tunnels in Baltimore and in other places. So the needs out there, I don't think are questionable. And when I say, I guess you could wait, there are some in Congress that are still sticking their head in the sand and thinking that we can wait on some of these big investments.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, but it's going to take us. It's going to take us screaming and hollering because look. As I've said, you look at our roads, you look at our bridges, you look at what we see in the news, and even stuff that we don't see. I mean, the airports, that you've got planes bumping into each other, and you've got all of the ports that need work. If we want to have a 21st century business climate, I don't think we can really do it on a 20th century infrastructure.
Well, right. I mean, as I said, you've got a number of components here. One is, a big infrastructure package would put people to work right now. And then the great thing about infrastructure is that, the positive jobs impact doesn't end there. You've got now, whether it's highways or deeper ports or more efficient airports or transit systems that are getting people to work. You now have systems that employ people on their own, and that we know from study after study really grow local and regional economies. So, when you're looking for an example in an investment in the Northeast Corridor, it is a huge economic driver. And when you have these trains that are delayed and, trains that are getting shut down because they can't go through the tunnels anymore, that's going to be a huge economic tug on their economy. So for all these reasons, it really is the right thing to do, and it makes sense from a jobs and economic perspective.
Now, what I see going on in Congress right now, because I think even Republicans realize that there's something that need to be done immediately. And if we have another bridge collapse, or if we have another levee break, or if we have another one of these huge infrastructure failures, that people are going to demand things be done. From what I'm seeing coming out of Congress, you're seeing Republicans pushing a national right to work bill, a repeal of Davis-Bacon. You're seeing them set up you're setting the situation to where, we can rebuild our infrastructure, but on poverty wage jobs.
Yeah, and our message to those in Congress who would go down that path is, we're not going to stand for it. You can't sort of build this economy and create jobs on one hand, and then avoid whether it's Davis-Bacon or Buy America rules or the other standards that are in place to make sure that the jobs that are created that I've talked about don't only are jobs, but they're good jobs, and they're jobs that can support middle-class families, and they're jobs that can, grow our economy. Right to work is something that, on the same thing, we're going to strongly oppose that and make the case that if your goal is to lower wages and bring more economic insecurity, then you should pass right to work. But if your goal is to really make sure that folks are earning a middle-class income, that's something that has to be rejected. And we're going to, we're not just going to talk about rebuilding our country. We're going to talk about rebuilding our country in a way from a jobs perspective that makes sense for everyone.
And rebuilding that middle class. And look, I've been saying for a while now, if the Republicans truly wanted to have a political dynasty for the next generation or two, a huge infrastructure bill would solidify their dominance with white working class voters and with working class voters, because you put them back to work, you built infrastructure, you made them feel good. I mean, people vote on when times are good.
Yeah, look, we think infrastructure is a winner politically as well. I mean, people are tired of being stuck in traffic. They see what's happening around them. To your point, you have another bad story about a bridge collapse or an airport that has delay after delay after delay. They start to look around and say, what is my member of Congress doing? And if my member of Congress isn't doing anything about it, why? And again, everyone agrees that the needs are there. It is going to cost a lot of money. There's no question about that. But this is a big country. There's ways to fund and finance this stuff in the right way. Obviously, a lot of people are looking at this and saying, well, this is a great opportunity for the private sector to come in and finance all this. There's a role for the private sector in how we build and rebuild our nation's infrastructure, but we have got to push back against sort of an over-reliance on that. The idea that the private sector alone is going to solve this problem is foolish. There needs to be a robust, federal grant program in place. That's how Congress has done this, over the years. They just got to make it bigger and be a little bit more bold in how they find the financing. And when you do go to a private sector model, we have to make sure that the same labor protections and the same standards that apply on the public side apply on the private side, so that we're not creating just jobs, but good jobs. So that's clearly one thing that we're going to be very focused on as this debate unfolds.
That's a start. I mean, but I've been saying for a while what Trump and the Republicans seem to want is payday lending for infrastructure. We're going to really set up a situation where Wall Street benefits not just in making a boatload of money off of us, but also controls our infrastructure and our movements.
Yeah, I mean, again, we have to push back when the private sector is going to come in here and try to take ownership of for example, some of our public transit systems. That creates real problems from a service perspective and from a worker perspective. And we're not. The goal here of investing in infrastructure should not be to enrich Wall Street. It should be to rebuild, critical components of our economy, and to do so in the public interest and to create good jobs. And again, there's a role for the private sector in how you get that done, but it's got to be guided. It's got to be guided by a broader public interest and broader pro-economy perspective, and not just enriching people that are already enriched.
No, but I go back to when we built the highway system. You look back to what Eisenhower did back then, and I don't remember Wall Street having a huge hand in that. I don't think we need Wall Street. I think we build roads and bridges, we build infrastructure for the betterment of the country and for us. And we charge business for it because they're the ones who really benefit from it. It just seems that we've kind of screwed that around a little bit.
Yeah, no, look, I think that's right. I think the highway program is a great example, and other components of our infrastructure were built with tax dollars or gas taxes, or again, there's sort of other mechanisms that go into funding our nation's infrastructure system, and members of Congress and the administration just have to have the courage to figure out how you can raise those, how you can raise the revenues and the funding that you need to do this. This country spends a lot of money on a lot of different priorities, and we have to readjust some of those priorities. And and again, just to say, well, the private sector will take care of it is really a mistake, and not putting federal money into that.
Yeah,
so,
I think the private sector will.
I'm sorry?
No, I think the private sector will take care of themselves, not so much us.
Right.
If you want a cash box on every corner, or every time you drive across the street to ching ching, then that's the way to go, I think.
Yeah, and again, that's everyone's got sort of their own motivations here to getting involved in this debate. Obviously, if you're a Wall Street person, your goal is to make money. But if you're the federal government, and if you're the labor movement, if you're sort of other people that want a broader positive purpose for investing in infrastructure, I think your goal is a little different. And we need to make sure that those voices are heard as this thing gets hammered out, because there's a lot of people in Congress who want to do giveaways to Wall Street, and we've seen that already in other parts of our debate, and we shouldn't let it happen here.
There you go. Well, Larry, I appreciate you taking time for us. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Great talk with you, Larry Willis, Secretary-Treasurer of the Transportation Trades Department, AFL-CIO. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Keeps on raining, levee's going to break. If it keeps on raining, levee's going to break. When the levee breaks, have no place to stay.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1946. That was the day that United Auto Worker members won an 18.5-cent hourly raise after a 4-month strike against General Motors. After World War II, workers grew increasingly frustrated. The war years were a time of labor peace, as most unions agreed not to go out on strike in order to support the war production efforts. But during the war, as companies raked in profits, many workers felt that they were not receiving a fair share. Worse, wartime shortages saw the price of consumer goods skyrocket. $1 simply could not stretch as far as it once had. After the war ended, the workers wanted to make up for the ground they felt they had lost during the conflict. A wave of strikes washed over the United States. Walter Reuther led the auto workers out on strike on November 21st, 1945. Their demand was a 30% raise. Reuther publicly argued that General Motors could afford to pay the raise without raising the price of their cars. He urged the company to open its books so the public could see their finances. The UAW laid out its reasoning in a report entitled Purchasing Power for Prosperity. The strike wore on for more than 100 days, but the union had done a good job making its case to the public. Finally, General Motors agreed to a raise, as well as improved benefits, such as a better recognition of seniority and promotions and protections for the union members. The contract was seen as a huge step forward for organized labor to take a seat at the table with capital. The strike and its settlement solidified Reuther as the leader of the UAW and a powerful voice for workers. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happen!
Working class heroes, they are the ones who helped to build this land. Working class heroes.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Get on the website, ricksmithshow.com. So $4.6 trillion just to get us from the D plus all the way up to a B. Not even the best in the world, just good. And the thing is, and this is what gets me, from the last report until now, again, it's gone up higher and higher. And the next one, if we do nothing, will get worse. And look, I go back to the reality. The reality is, back in 2009, those of us who don't have amnesia remember that the president wanted to do a bunch of shovel-ready projects, wanted to throw a boatload of money into it, wanted a huge stimulus. And what did Republicans say? No! Tax cuts. And Obama being the guy who, well, let's see if we can work across the aisle. Let's try and get consensus. Let's try and be nice. Said, okay, tax cuts. We'll do some tax cuts. We won't spend as much on infrastructure. We'll dwindle down the amount that we're asking, and we'll go that route. I argued at that time that, one, the amount we interjected into the economy in the form of a stimulus should have been much bigger, much chunkier, much more of a jolt to get everything going again. Because in the Keynesian idea of priming the pump, getting it going, and a good jolt, I think it would have been much better. And the idea of giving tax cuts seemed to me to be the wrong idea, because tax cuts don't matter to people who don't have jobs. So give them jobs, tax them, pay for things, seemed like the way to go. We didn't do that. And now the infrastructure bill is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. You go back to $1 trillion in 2009 would have been enormous, would have solved a lot of our problems. Yet here we are, almost 8 years later, and well, it's now $4.6 trillion. And next year it will be 5, and the year after it'll be 5.2, and it will just continue to grow. But here's the other part of this, and the part that really, really infuriates me. Because you go back to 2009, countries around the world, investors around the world were giving us money. Please take it, please, please, please borrow our money, please, and no interest, because they were afraid of deflation, scared to death. In fact, they were taking negative. They were giving us money and wanting less back because they didn't want the entire system to collapse. Big corporations, and I remember it at the time, one of the big railroads took out, I think it was $250 billion or some really outrageous amount of money over the next 100 years. And they got it at an interest rate where you go, wow, if I were a big corporation and I could do that, it's exactly what I would have done. Because you could have just taken that money and then held on to it, reinvested it, 20 years down the road, and it would have paid for itself. So understand this. We could have literally borrowed money, rebuilt our infrastructure, and it would have cost us, well, nothing more than the face value, and actually even probably less. But here we are now. You've got the Fed saying here on Wednesday they're considering raising interest rates again. And what does that mean? That means that $4.6 trillion is going to cost us more. Because understand, we're going to have to pay interest on it now. And if we do the payday lending route, which is what Trump keeps putting out there, we want public-private partnerships, which, understand, when I hear public-private partnerships, I think public money going to create private profits. To me, that's simple. That means that we're going to be liable for it. It's going to be our dollars. We're paying for it. And it's going to go to the profiteers who are going to take their portion of it for themselves and then get to own our infrastructure. They get to own our stuff. I mean, that's the brilliant part of this. And then we get to complain about and of course, they're going to do it in a way to where they're insulated. They're going to set up these authorities to where they still control it, but it'll look like it's a quasi-government thing, so we can go, government's bad. When it's really the Wall Street folks who are just beating us senseless. And when you go back and you think about the Eisenhower years, Eisenhower built his administration through his idea and his initiatives, a Republican, and I give him credit for this, massive infrastructure spending across this country. Built the highway system. Before we had the highway system, we had skinny roads, one lane each direction. They went, it took you forever to get where you needed to go. So we said, no, we need superhighways because, look, we looked at Germany and said, hey, Germany did something interesting. That Autobahn thing, we should do that because you know what? They were able, and this is how they sold it and justified it. We were able to move bombs around. So he sold it because I guess we can only do things in this country when there's a military imperative. So we said, we can move bombs around. They said, yeah, move bombs around and maybe, business and people will benefit too. So we built this, huge amounts of money, huge interjection of cash into the economy, and built a massive, massive middle class, fueled a prosperous middle class. Now think of today's Republicans saying, no, we can't do that. We're going to repeal Davis-Bacon. We're going to make everyone right to work, and it's all going to be great because we're going to be able to get this stuff done on the real cheap. And maybe even we'll bring in people from Mexico to do it. Yes, I know. The Donald wants to build the big, beautiful wall. I get it. Think about it from the perspective of business, though. I mean, we're now competing in a 21st century with in some cases, 1930s infrastructure. A lot of the stuff that came out of the New Deal, a lot of the stuff that came out of the Eisenhower years, that's still the brunt of our infrastructure. We haven't had that major building initiative that says, you know what, we're reforming and rethinking what our society looks like. To me, when President Obama was talking about, hey, let's do high-speed rail, that was the beginning of that thought process of what does it look like to live in this country in 30 or 40 or 50 years? How do we move people from work to home to entertainment to recreation? How do we move around? How do we get people to go from, where I live in central Pennsylvania to New York or Washington or California? How is it? How are we changing how things are done? Because look, understand, the more of us that are born, the more of us that live, the more of us that are here, the tighter our infrastructure is going to get. And you go into any major city, rush hour traffic is a nightmare. I don't even live near a real major city. I don't think Harrisburg, Pennsylvania is a real major city. But the traffic during rush hour is just mind-blowing because the infrastructure is, 20 years outdated. In fact, I was talking to a guy not too long ago who said, look, when we do an infrastructure project here in this part of the state, it's already 10 years outdated because we're thinking about what we need right now. This will fix our problem right now. Well, right now, by the time you get it done, is 10 years down the road, and you're already outdated. We've seemed to have lost this vision for the future. And again, I go back to, not a big fan of Thomas Friedman, the New York Times columnist, but, he was spot on in his assessment that our infrastructure, when you compare it to China's, is like going from the Jetsons to the Flintstones. He said he'd gone from Beijing to LAX, and it was like going from the Jetsons to the Flintstones. That's just how completely backwards our setup is. And he said, we used to in this country strive for advancement. We used to go right up to technology as far as we could go and then try and push beyond it. We don't seem to be that country anymore. We seem to go, private sector, do it. Invisible people, do it. But we as a society don't. And the scary thing is we've got a guy in the White House right now and an administration right now hell-bent on destroying institutions and tearing this down. So the question again comes back to what's the vision? What's the vision for 20, 30 years? Is it corporate rule? Do we have a one world corporate government? Is that the goal? Does everything have to go through Wall Street to get its scoring? Do we do away with the Congressional Budget Office and just go right to Wall Street? Because that's all that seems to really matter, what Wall Street thinks. Not so much about what Main Street thinks. So that's the question. And this problem that we're having with infrastructure is only going to get worse. And it's only going to get more costly the longer we keep pushing it off. Now, personally, I think if the Republicans wanted political dominance, they would ram through the biggest infrastructure bill they could get. And they would get people back to work immediately. But I don't think they can. I don't think they can do it. I think they're that dysfunctional that even they know what would be good for them politically, they still can't get it done. And what's going to be interesting is what happens over the next couple of weeks with the AHCA and how this will go down. Curious your thoughts, 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people.
Uncovering the con and conservatism. Rick Smith.
More than 1 million acres burning tonight across Texas, Oklahoma, Colorado, and Kansas.
State of emergency declared for early season wildfires across 4 states. Trump administration plans cuts to Coast Guard, FEMA, and Energy Star program. Gulf of Mexico dolphins still suffering effects of the 2010 BP oil disaster. Plus,
air pollution is something that we can solve.
Pollution is responsible for the deaths of 1.7 million children each year.
All of those stories and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
The rationale for the proposed cuts? Limiting federal spending and overreach by allowing states to enforce environmental laws.
What could possibly go wrong? This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, is it just me, or does it seem very, very early for wildfire season to already be kicking off.
It is very, very early for wildfire season, especially in Oklahoma. Now, this is the state that in early February hit a record high of 100 degrees. Now, a state of emergency has been declared by Oklahoma Governor Mary Fallin due to an outbreak of wildfires in what officials say is the worst wildfire event in northwest Oklahoma history. This early season outbreak of wildfires across 4 states, Oklahoma, Kansas, Texas, and Colorado, has already killed at least 6 people and burned more than 1 million acres.
What's the name of the new EPA administrator again?
Scott Pruitt.
And he doesn't believe in climate change, right?
No, he doesn't.
And where is he from again?
Oklahoma.
Huh.
Well, the wildfires are also what makes the Trump administration's proposed budget cuts even more inexplicable. The Trump administration's Office of Management and Budget proposes slashing the budget of FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, by 15%, and that would directly affect disaster relief, response, and recovery for states that have natural disasters like tornadoes, hurricanes, floods, and wildfires, like in Oklahoma. The Office of Management and Budget also plans significant cuts to the U.S. Coast Guard. That would impact not only national security in protecting the nation's vast coastlines, but also the Coast Guard's operations in curbing illegal fishing, its capacity as the first responder to offshore oil spills, and the Coast Guard's operations in the Arctic, especially now that Russia is expanding its reach in exploiting the melting Arctic's fossil fuel resources.
I thought that Donald Trump was going to increase military spending by $54 billion. Is the Coast Guard no longer a part of the military?
Apparently not.
That's weird.
The OMB also proposes eliminating the popular Energy Star program for consumer products. The Energy Star program sets energy efficiency standards for appliances and electronics that save consumers money, billions in energy costs every single year. Of course, that may be why it's slated for elimination, because $1 billion saved is $1 billion not paid to the energy industry.
Well said.
Meanwhile, a group of scientists who are tracking changes to the websites of federal science agencies announced this week that the website of the Environmental Protection Agency's Science and Technology Office has removed the word science from its mission statement. So the EPA Science and Technology Office writes clean water standards. Its website used to say it relied on science-based standards for clean drinking water. Now it just says it relies on, quote, economically and technologically achievable standards for clean water.
Wow. Talk about lowering the bar.
The new Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke this week announced another sale of leases for offshore drilling in federal waters in the Gulf of Mexico. But scientists say wildlife in the Gulf still hasn't recovered from the BP oil disaster in 2010. A new study finds the endangered Kemp's Ridley sea turtle still has a 75% mortality rate. Bottlenose dolphin populations in the Gulf are still suffering high rates of severe lung disease and low reproductive rates. Pollution is also a leading cause of death among young children around the world. That's according to new data from the World Health Organization. Pollution is responsible for 25% of the deaths of young children under the age of 5 around the world. That is 1.7 million children every year from toxic air, contaminated water, and lack of sanitation. Air pollution is particularly inescapable, warns WHO Director General Dr. Margaret Chan in an interview with the BBC.
Everybody has to breathe. And when breathing becomes deadly, the entire city, doesn't matter which part you are in, become a hazard to health.
Finally, though, some good news. The air is a lot cleaner in the United Kingdom now as the British government phases out the use of coal. And the UK's carbon emissions have fallen at the same time by switching to cleaner burning natural gas, ramping up renewables, and also with a strong carbon tax. That carbon tax has helped cut Britain's emissions to 19th century levels.
Silly Britain. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
big winners in the AHCA. We know the big winners are going to be the wealthy. We get that. Absolutely. The fact of the matter is, according to the Joint Committee on Taxation, households with incomes in excess of $1 million a year, they're going to get tax cuts over the next decade that will add up to $157 billion with a B billion dollars. $157 billion to those making over $1 million a year. And those folks at the very top, our heavy 400, well, they're going to see an average tax cut of about $7 million a year. What's interesting to me, again, you go back to the funding mechanism for the ACA. 97% of us, of the people, we the people, paid nothing. No additional taxes. So you're looking at the reality being, by taking health care from millions of people, we're going to give tax breaks to about 3% of the folks of the country. And again, it comes back to priorities. Where are your priorities? Who are you working for? Can you make the argument that the Republicans, what we see in front of us, can you make the argument that they care about us, or is it about the 3%? I would argue it's only about the 1%, but the other two, they benefit a little bit. And you come back to the ACA and the funding mechanisms. This was paid for. Republicans demanded it had to be paid for, and it was. And it didn't raise taxes on working people at all. Now, it did say that you had to have coverage. You do have to, you do. And I had this argument again recently about car insurance. Nobody seems to be all that upset about going, you know what, I'm driving on the road and I should protect myself from if I hit somebody that I'm not going to go bankrupt, or if someone hits me, I'm not going to go bankrupt. We seem to have bought that okay. I don't see a lot of people going, no, it's my right to not have insurance because I want to go like a missile down the road and cause chaos. We don't seem to be all that upset about it. And in fact, I look at car insurance as almost, it's outrageous, the amount that you pay for it, because you don't ever use it. And when you do, they jack the rates up or drop you. Republicans don't even want that for a system. It's really, really very bizarre. And I was reading this Reuters article, this AP article this morning. And they look at Denver and the Denver Health Medical Center, what they had done. The region evidently hired more than 250 people and built about $27 million in primary care clinics. When Obamacare was passed, they said, there's going to be all these people with insurance. There are all these people who are going to demand care. So we've got to build the infrastructure and create the jobs and do all that for that need. And again, this goes back to what I've been saying for a very long time. You want to stimulate the economy? Give employers demand. Don't give the companies tax breaks. Give them customers. And here in Denver, they said, hey, there are going to be more people who are going to have health insurance. In fact, I guess they said some 80,000 people in the Denver area were able to get health insurance because of the ACA. And they go, those 80,000 people, they're going to need care, and they're going to come. They've built it. They will come. And almost immediately, they saw the rise of people needing care. And what they did is they were ready. They understood that we need to set up a system that's going to care for people. And we don't want them all rushing to the emergency room. And I remember back here in Pennsylvania, back during the Rendell years, people were going crazy about Rendell's proposal of saying, maybe the hospital should have a, one of these urgent care kind of center places to where it's not really an absolute emergency, but you can't get into your family doctor. For instance, I thought the kids had strep throat. Well, it was a weekend. Doctor's office was closed. What are your choices? Your choices are go to the emergency room or suffer till Monday and hope you can get an appointment. Any parent's going to go emergency room. So Rendell back then said, hey, let's set up a system where you go to the emergency room. They look at you and say, no, this isn't really an emergency. Go over there to the to the other thing and make that cost much less because, look, at the end of the day, it's not about really a true emergency. And people went crazy. I have socialized medicine and getting between me and my doctor and nonsense. There in Denver, they said, you know what, we're going to set that kind of a system up. And it worked. They invested a ton of money in their healthcare system. More people got care. It was working. Now what's going to happen is the Republicans are going to pull the rug out from under them. So all of their investment's going to go down the pot because what the Denver Health System Company is saying, the Denver Health Medical Centers are saying, is that they're going to see revenue losses as high as $85 million by 2020 once they pull the rug out from under them. Because what's going to happen is people are going to go, hey, I'm used to getting care. So what if I don't have insurance? Go into the emergency room, which is why you've got the American Hospital Association and the Catholic Health Association of the United States, both, along with tons of other groups, adamantly opposed to these changes. And it's not rocket science. None of this stuff is difficult to figure out. I go back to the opposition years that the Republicans were blocking everything Obama did. One of their key lines, and you'll remember this, is Republicans love to say that, well, we need to give employers and businesses certainty. I remember the authoritarian, we need to give them certainty. And they're always talking about tax cuts. We're holding their taxes down. We're not going to tax them. They need that certainty. Well, you know what? They need the certainty that health care is going to be there as well. These businesses need the certainty that you're not going to pull the rug out from under them. And as I understand, across where I'm at in Pennsylvania, all that stuff is stopped. Everything is stagnant. So as things stop, again, we're a country that's continually growing. When growth stops, you're creating a crisis down the road. And this is what Republicans do really well. They're masters at creating crisis because then it turns into political opportunism. So as they create these massive pitfalls, again, so that they can go back and say, see, we told you it wasn't going to work. As they create these massive pitfalls, what they're doing, again, is harming the poorest among us, one, and the poor working class. But it's on the rest of us as well, because nothing happens in a vacuum. If the poor in the working class and the poor below us, if they don't get care, if they don't get insurance, doesn't mean they're stopping going to the doctor. It just means they're going back to the emergency room, right? And what does that mean? That means the hospitals have got to make that up somewhere else. And what does that mean? That means our rates go up. All of us. We're already paying for it. And this is the thing that I was saying back in 2009 and 2010. We're already paying for everyone to get this kind of care. It's just we're paying an outrageous amount for it. You look at other places around the globe that have a national health care, that have, either a single payer system, or like the UK, which is actual universal government run care, or Canada, which is kind of a little bit of both. You look at those places, they do it for almost half of what we spend. And in a lot of cases get the same or better outcomes. Now, I know if you want a hip replacement in Canada, I've heard this 1,000 times. If you're going to want a hip replacement in Canada, it's going to take 6 months. Yeah, it's true. It's true. And could we make that better? Yeah, we could. But we don't seem to want to, because we keep buying into the invisible hand. The only reason people do things in this country, Rick, is because profit. And, on a certain level, I get that, but it's not the only reason people do things. And it's not a reason that we should say, well, we're not going to get involved in healthcare because the invisible man's there. So as we look at this, the bottom line, and my last word on this for today, the bottom line is this is about less for us and more for the 1% to 3%. It doesn't get any simpler than that. And at the end of the day, I go back to what my high school government teacher said. And again, one of those lessons that, teachers inflicting their knowledge on the rest of us. He was very clear. At the end of the day, when I asked, which party should you be a member of? There's two, the Democrats and which one? And he said, simple. Republicans are for big business right now. Democrats are for the very poor. And you folks in the middle, you're going to pay for both of them. So you have to decide, which are you closer to? You're closer to being the millionaires and the billionaires, or closer to being in poverty? That's going to kind of, tell you where your policy thoughts are. And the older I get, the more I realize that to be probably one of the best bits of advice I ever got. At the end of the day, are my interests that of Warren Buffett, or of that single mother with children using the WIC card? That's the question. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Time to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1963. That was the day Transport Workers Union Local 260 negotiated its first contract with the Pioneer Bus Company in Houston, Texas. It came after months of fighting to build an integrated union there. The local had learned the previous year that Pioneer was organized by an independent union that maintained Jim Crow bargaining units. The drivers, dispatchers, and shop employees union maintained separate and unequal bargaining units, one for white workers and one for black workers. They also had separate seniority lists, representation, and levels of promotion. The Transport Workers Union filed a petition with the National Labor Relations Board against the drivers' union. They demanded an election. The existing union argued that collective bargaining agreements already existed, which precluded any possibility of holding a new election for representation. The TWU pushed back. They contended that the contract bar rule could not apply to discriminatory agreements that divided workers along racial lines. The TWU also argued that it would be unconstitutional for the board to uphold Jim Crow contracts. The board agreed with the TWU and threatened to decertify the drivers' union on the basis of racial discrimination. They concluded that where the bargaining representative of employees in an appropriate union executes separate contracts or even a single contract discriminating between Negro and white employees on racial lines, the board will not deem such contracts as a bar to an election. In the days before the 1964 Civil Rights Act, the board drew from Brown versus Board of Education to issue its ruling in December of 1962. The TWU won the election by a 3-1 margin and championed the end of Jim Crow at Pioneer.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2 Minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, for Talk Media News. Sometimes a victory is a loss. That's how the Polish government is viewing the re-election of former Prime Minister Donald Tusk as the president of the European Council on Friday. You'd think Poland would want one of its top diplomats being one of the leaders of the European Union, but that wasn't the case. Tusk has been critical of the conservative Polish government, which has become solidly Eurosceptic in recent years. He notably threatened to punish Poland if the country didn't abide by a EU-wide refugee resettlement quota. Poland had hoped to rally Hungary, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic into vetoing Tusk's re-election, but none of them followed Warsaw's lead. Poland, along with those three countries, constitute the so-called Visegrad Group, a coalition that often votes together. Poland fancied itself something of the leader of that group, but after losing out on the Tusk vote, Poland's foreign minister conceded, quote, "We can be its spokesman." And SpaceX and Tesla founder Elon Musk is already a tech pioneer. Now he's attempting to be a political savior for southern Australia. That region has been experiencing an electricity crisis in recent months, including several rolling blackouts. Depending on which politician you ask, the problem is either unreliable renewable energy or the unexpected closure of aging coal plants. Whatever the cause, Elon Musk has taken to Twitter to announce he has a fix. Give Tesla 100 days, he said Friday, and we'll build a 100-megawatt battery storage facility. If Tesla misses that 100-day deadline, the project is free. Tesla doesn't have a big presence in Australia, but the company just finished an 80-megawatt battery farm in just 90 days. One Australian legislator responded to Musk on Twitter, writing, "Let's talk." For more global news headlines, visit TalkMediaNews.com.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. One of those moments where you go, you got to give a Republican credit for doing something right. And when they do something right, as you know on this program, I do give them credit where they deserve it. And that's the thing, where they deserve it. And I look at the governor of Tennessee, Bill Haslam. Again, a way off, pro-business, anti-public sector kind of governor, is the leader of the free tuition movement across the country. You may remember a couple years ago, Haslam pushed through there in Tennessee free community college for all high school graduates. So in Tennessee, if you're a high school graduate, you can go to one of the community colleges for free. The state will pick it up. They have also gone and made the state's technical schools free for all residents, no matter when you've graduated. So the idea, and this is what I've talked about for a long time, we need to have the ability to do lifelong learning. Because as the economy changes, people are going to need to upgrade their skills. And, people are going to say, hey, while I have a job, I know it's probably going to go away. I should be upgrading my skills. Maybe do something else. Or maybe just for the idea that we love learning. Just kind of a thought. But he's done that in Tennessee. So you can go to the technical schools, learn HVAC, learn carpentry, whatever. And good. Now he's pushing to expand that to make Tennessee the first to offer community college to anyone. If you don't have a post-secondary degree or certificate of any sort, we're going to get you free college to get you the opportunity to do that. And again, what we've been talking about here in Pennsylvania, and I've been saying this for a long time, education, we're told, is the key. If you want to attract business, you need an educated workforce. Understand that. Tennessee is already a right-to-work state. It's already one of the lowest paid states in the country. And they're not lighting the world on fire with attracting businesses. They've given out, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in tax sweeteners to try and attract businesses there. But their workforce is, behind. So Haslam, as a business guy, is going, we need an educated workforce. How do we do that? Well, we make it accessible. Unlike what we're doing here in Pennsylvania and a lot of other states, which is saddling people with massive debt for a lifetime for the hope that maybe they can get a job. See, again, I'm not a huge Haslam fan, but on this front, the blind squirrel found a nut. And I'm in favor of it. It's something we should be doing all across the country. It's something that Bernie Sanders talked about during the campaign. While the Democrats and all the Republicans said, can't be done. It's being done in Tennessee, in a heavily Republican state like Tennessee. I mean, it's just outrageous that we can't get the rest of the country on board with this idea. And we're going to see what happens here. But good on them. And next step would be, free college. The next step would be getting people the ability to access that education. Because, look, we've been told for a long time, education's the golden ticket, going to get you to the middle class. We'll see what happens in Tennessee. The hope is that it works out. Now, my wife was just telling me the other day that, there's a program in one of the local school districts that the high school and the community college they've kind of worked together, and they're going to try and do just this. There's a want, there's a need. Maybe this is something that our governor could run on. Maybe this is something that our governor could say, look, the Republicans doing it in Tennessee. Why can't we do it in Pennsylvania? And maybe the governor in Ohio or the governor in California. Wait a minute, California used to have free education. That's right, they used to. And it was sainted Sir Ronnie Reagan who basically destroyed that. So Republicans take it away. Maybe they could be the ones who bring it back. Because at the end of the day, what's happened with their experiment is we've created a massive debt class. And that would be our young people. Thanks, GOP. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts, questions, comments. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Should we provide free college to everyone in this country? Should it become, instead of K through 12, K through 14, or K through 16? Rick@thericksmithshow.com to share your thoughts. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you're going. As always, again, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email Rick at the Rick